Oh, and did I mention
mushy
there's
peas?
no mushy peas? Honestly, it's like being in the south of England. And it's...
Greetings, you amazing people, and welcome back to another reaction video. We got a bloody good one today. I love food. Anything to do with food in America, I am in. Today's video is entitled 7 Ways British and American Restaurants Are Very Different. Yes, there's another Lawrence Brown from Lost on the Pond reaction video. I cannot wait to get into this. Please support our channel by subscribing, hitting that notification bell, and also liking this video. Right, that's quite enough of my jibber jabber. Let's get on with the video.
I'm sure to some degree there'll be places in Britain that sell Chicago-style pizza even though it's nothing like it. Or even in my birthplace of Cleveland, Chicago-style burgers, whatever that is. Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond. And one of those memos pertains to restaurants. And because food is involved, restaurants happen to be a kind of central hub for where British and American differences play out more broadly. Because we see differences in not just the food, but the terminology that's used and some of the customs that are practiced and the practices that are customs. Of course, the mere concept of a restaurant, I don't know why I'm doing that, the mere concept of a restaurant is universal. But the way that they are presented to and used by Brits and Americans is subtly and sometimes not so subtly different. And so here are 7 ways in which British and American restaurants are very different. For Brits moving to or even visiting the United States of America, one of the biggest culture shocks, at least for me, was the kind of round-the-clock attention that servers pay to their customers. What's that? Your glass of water is empty? We can't be having that. American servers come right on over, minus the whistling sound.
I have to say that the service, whenever I've been there, the service is just first class. I think America, you probably will be disappointed if you came over here because they're not as attentive. But I just love it. They're just they're really nice to kids. Hello cutie. How you doing? Is the food okay? Everything all right? And I know they're doing it because part of them because they want to and pride in the business, etc. But also basically after a good service and a good service tip. But yeah, most noticeable.
Usually. And in between that and a bite of your broccoli, American waitstaff will be over just to simply ask, how's that food tasting? Can I get you anything else? Golly gee, that's a nice accent. Which part of Australia are you from? Those kind of questions. Whereas British waitstaff are staff that, wait to come over until you're all done. And part of this is tied to the notion of tips and tipping. In Britain, contrary to popular belief, servers do make a bulk of their income from tips. But unlike in America, tipping is voluntary and not at all expected. A lot of Brits who come to the United States, myself included, don't know this at first. In my case, I even asked the waiter how much I should tip, so I gave her the 75% she recommended and moved on. Of course, with time, I came to learn that the expected amount here in the United States of America is 15 to 20% of your bill and or check will come onto terminology later.
Wow, I've been over tipping in my time. Over here, I probably would give it like a 10% tip. If it's really good, but if it's not, I wouldn't tip. Let me know in the comments below. Do you typically tip between sort of 10 and 20% tip? Let me know.
It's often been noted, especially within the fast food industry, that portion sizes in the United States of America are much larger than their European counterparts. But often, depending on where you go, this can also be true of sit-down restaurants. One of the first major American sit-down chain restaurants that I visited was a little place called Applebee's. And at the likes of Applebee's, but also the Olive Garden, or TGI Friday, or any number of other chains.
I have been to TGI Friday once, but they're quite common. Well, I say they're common over. We've got a few of them over here, so when I go over, I don't tend to go to TGI Fridays, but Red Robin was always a good one. Wendy's, Taco Bell. I know we're going on to fast food now, but yeah.
Your appetizer almost feels like a main course slash entree. Again, terminologies later. And by the time that the actual main course arrives, you eat it merely out of politeness while pretending that this is all fine. And then, this is the really funny bit, they ask you if you want to see the dessert menu. And of course you can't say no because you're addicted to cheesecake. And that's always humongous and rich as opposed to humongous and poor, which is what you are when you leave the restaurant. Except that cheap joke doesn't quite work because American food on the whole is actually cheaper compared to the food served in Britain, which is partially how you account for the portion size difference. Now, after a while, I noticed that there were Americans all around me that instead of ploughing through this mountain of calories in one sitting, answered yes to what was then an unfamiliar question to me.
Interestingly enough, the obviously with the house, the cost of living crisis that's going on at the moment, my wife and I had a Chinese. It wasn't like a big Chinese. We had like a meal each. Wasn't lots of different servings. It was nearly £30, which I'm guessing would be about $50, $55 just for a takeaway. It wasn't sit down. It was delivered, like Just Eat. And yeah, it's about £30 or $55. Let me know in the comments below what you would pay for a Chinese takeaway for two.
That's right. It's completely normal in the United States of America to have your food boxed at the end of the meal
Yeah.
with the intention of you taking it home and refrigerating it, or just eat it later that night if you're feeling lucky. And of course, now that makes sense, right? I mean, you've paid your money for that food. You want to get your money's worth. But on top of that, it cuts down on waste. But at first, just because of what I was used to back home, it seemed weird to be taking leftovers home from a restaurant. In Britain, as evidenced by this BBC article from a few years back, we've historically felt embarrassed even to ask for a box or a doggy bag because I don't know, I haven't a clue.
I know where he's coming from, but I don't mind. Like, can I have a bag because I've paid for this. It's lovely food. I don't want it to go to waste. I want to take it home and eat it later or the next day. But yes, I know where he's coming from though. Years and years ago, it was a bit like doggy bag. But now I don't care. It's like, no, paid for that. I'm having that later.
Actually. Either way, I think leftovers are great to the extent that I have Indian food for breakfast. Don't judge me.
Yeah, I've done that, Indian food. I've had a kebab for breakfast before.
Buffets, aside from the fact that America seems to be just a tad more into them than Britain, there's an aspect of the buffet going experience that differs greatly between the two countries. Where I was from, depending on the buffet in question, I almost got the impression that it was rude to the kitchen staff to ask for a new plate when you're going up for seconds. In other words, whenever I went for, say, a Chinese buffet, I would go up, get my plate, scoop on all the food, go back to my table, realise that I am unrelentingly gluttonous, and then go back up for seconds using the same plate. It made me feel good that while devouring lots of solids, I'd done a solid to the kitchen staff. That could be taken so many ways. Whereas once I moved to the United States, I realised that this was considered either weird or unhygienic. At American buffets, customers are expected to get a new, cleaner plate when they go up for seconds, because this is a measure seen at preventing cross-contamination. But I have to say, after practicing both methods, neither has caused me any personal problems. But while we're on the subject of Chinese food, that brings us on to this. I think it's fair to say that in both Britain and America, ethnic food, or food that is usually associated with a country that is not this one, is extremely popular.
Yeah.
And to varying degrees, no matter if you're talking about the United States or Britain, the same countries are often represented at the dinner table. Off the top of my head, the big one is Chinese food. Except you guessed it, British Chinese food and American Chinese food is vastly different. In Britain, Chinese food is often spicy, sometimes curry-based. In the US, on the other hand, Chinese food tends to be centered around standalone fried meats, usually of the chicken variety. Now, these are not entirely absent from Britain, but one way that America differentiates itself is that its Chinese food tends to be a lot sweeter than in Britain. But whichever way you slice it, I planned that. Both British and American Chinese cuisine is a modified version of what actual Chinese people eat in China. And this seems to be a common theme that actually unites Britain and America. Take, for example, Indian food. While it should be pointed out that Indian food is more widely eaten in Britain than in the United States, and that in my experience, certain Indian curries tend to be spicier than their American counterparts, neither is anywhere near as spicy as authentic Indian. On the other hand, in terms of everything I just said there, almost the exact opposite is true of Mexican food. America, by virtue of its neighborly status with Mexico, eats way more Mexican food.
I'm sorry, but I am starving. I am so hungry now. I just bloody love food.
food than Britain does. Even if, by all accounts, tacos and the like have started to make waves in Britain. But even America's version of Mexican food is often a departure from what's eaten south of the border, with authentic Mexican food often less spicy than Americans are used to. And it was in the restaurants of America that I got a first-hand feel for how America likes to modify the national dishes of other countries to create what amounts to their own version. Because they even do this with English cuisine, and that brings us on to this. If you were to ask me to name 3 dishes from both countries, off the top of my head, I would say
for Britain, fried breakfast, roast dinner, and fish and chips.
This. For Britain, fish and chips, Sunday roast,
Yep.
and a full English breakfast.
Oh! Boom!
For America, hamburgers, hot dogs, and pizza. And yes, I realise that all of those have disputed or undisputed origins in Germany and Italy.
Yeah.
But over time, they have become synonymous with the United States. But to a lesser degree, and because of American influence, hamburgers, hot dogs, and pizza can all be found in restaurants in the UK. And I'm sure to some degree there'll be places in Britain that sell Chicago-style pizza even though it's nothing like it. Or even in my birthplace of Cleethorpes, Chicago-style burgers. Why?
I've never had a Chicago-style pizza. What makes it so different? Is it just the toppings? Is it the bread? Or is it an amalgamation of all of it? Or is it like the thick crust? Or let me know in the comments below.
Whatever that is. But in reverse, whenever America tries to replicate popular British dishes, it's sort of like being in an alternate universe. It's great, but it's different. Very rarely do you get fish and chips where the chips/fries are thick cut and greasy, and the fish is singular and large. Instead, you usually get 3 or 4 smaller pieces of fish that are usually a tad saltier than what you'd expect back home. Oh, and did I mention
Mushy
there's
peas.
no mushy peas? Honestly, it's like being in the south of England. And it's
I beg your pardon, Mr. Brown. I love fish and chips. Well, I was brought up on the coast. We had fish and chips. We had mushy peas. Take that back, Mr. Brown.
in terms of the other two, the Sunday roast and the full English breakfast, well, I found those a lot harder to come by in the US than fish and chips. Even at those pubs that, you know, every state has, that purport to be authentically British. And lastly,
Terminology.
we can't talk about British versus American restaurant differences without talking about the terminology. You see, it's one thing to get your food boxed at the end of a sit-down meal, but many of us might like to take it home without sitting down in the restaurant in the first place. In Britain, I always knew this as getting takeaway.
Take out.
Which is why I was profoundly confused when I worked in an American office environment and they talked about the key takeaways from the meeting. I thought I was getting curry and chips. In America, this is referred to as takeout or sometimes carry out. And regardless of portion size, we can't even agree on what to call each meal. In the US, for the most part, the meal immediately preceding the main meal is usually known as an appetizer. In Britain, I always refer to this as a starter, but some, as the French do, might call it an entree. And this is where things get confusing, because Americans and Canadians alike use the word entree to mean the main meal. For us, the main meal is usually known as the main course. If it's a Sunday roast, that main course will include a Yorkshire pudding, and this is where things get doubly confusing, because we in Britain also use the word pudding as a catch-all term for dessert. In fairness, we do also interchangeably use the word dessert. In America, the word pudding is more specific, and the catch-all term has been deserted in favour of dessert. And the implements with which we eat this food, i.e. the knife, fork and spoon, is known collectively in the United States as silverware.
We say cutlery.
Whereas this word, when used in Britain, would pertain more to ornate metal plates, or perhaps metallic jugs, or sports trophies. A lot of the time, instead, we'll collectively refer to knives, forks and spoons as cutlery. And as we all know, it's very rude to leave a restaurant without paying. And this is why we ask for the bill, at least we do in Britain. Because
Americans say check.
most of the time here in the US, Americans will ask for the check.
Guys, you've got anything to add to this video, let me know in the comments below. And if you did enjoy it, don't forget to drop a like. It really, really helps us out. Are you hungry like me? I'm bloody starving. I'm starving. And if you would like to support the channel even more, we do have a Patreon. Check out the link in the pinned comments for all the fun-packed perks. And all that leaves me to say is take care, God bless. See you on the next video.